So, Aaron, let's rewind a little bit for people to get a context of this company that we are talking about, Steinhoff. What are its origins? Where does it come from?
Well, Tilas, it's a fascinating story. We have to go back to Germany in the early 1960s and meet a man called Bruno Steinhoff, who'd grown up on a farm in Germany and learned Russian in the last years of the Second World War. He then cottoned on to the fact that there was a lot of business to be made in Eastern Europe, and so he began a furniture business. And that rapidly expanded. He started not only selling furniture, but buying the plants that were producing the furniture. And then in the early 90s, as South Africa was opening up after the end of sanctions, he realized there was a possible business opportunity right on our doorstep.
And so how does then South Africa come in, Aaron? How does it become a company that is so closely associated with this country?
Well, Steinhoff's previously been called the IKEA of Africa, now more of an Enron of Africa because of its abysmal annus horribilis the last year. But what happened is that he realized that he needed to find pine countries that grew pine so that he could compete with IKEA back in the European market. And South Africa had a fairly established pine furniture sector. Unfortunately, our pine is yellow pine, though, and not white pine, which is the more Swedish kind of design, which a lot of people like. Nevertheless, he'd come here, he'd scoped out the potential for business activities, and through an accounting officer and friend, he met Marcus Jooste, and so began conversations about establishing a Steinhoff Africa as a counterpart to Steinhoff in Europe. And then in around 1998, the two merge, and Steinhoff first registers and lists on the JSE. Fast forward a couple of years, its primary listing is on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, its secondary listing is here in South Africa, and for that very reason, if you go back to some of the reports from late 2017, the JSE, after investigating the troubles at Steinhoff, said they weren't in a position to delist the company because its primary listing was in fact in Germany.
And how does it then become one of these top performers on the JSE and almost a darling of many in as far as trading is concerned?
Well, this is exactly the rub to us because, as you say, Steinhoff was the darling of many South African investors and investors further afield. It embarked on this almost voracious acquisition process in the early 2000s. And in fact, the business school at the University of Stellenbosch has done some very meticulous work to try and understand what happened and what went wrong. And that's why the delay on this forensic report from PricewaterhouseCoopers is so critical, because at this point we still don't know what exactly those accounting irregularities actually stand for. But it does seem from the work of Amabongane and others monitoring things that what happened was that many opaque companies and business structures, which included people very close to Marcus Jooste, then CEO, which he hadn't disclosed either to his board or investors, became involved in these many acquisitions, including things outside of its traditional business. So moving on from furniture to mattresses, to working in the supply chain, to really spreading its tentacles all around the world. And it seems that during that very aggressive process of acquisition that the wheels started to fall apart. But at the time, the auditors didn't seem to be cottoning on to what was going wrong. It was only toward the end of 2017 that they really realized something was rotten in the state of Steinhoff's accounts.
So from the work you've been doing, Aaron, as a final question, many people are exasperated that there doesn't seem to be any consequences for what happened at Steinhoff. And I'm afraid it's bad news in as far as the work that you've been doing in following up on investigations. It doesn't seem like anyone will be going to jail anytime soon, right?
Certainly not, and that's one of the concerns, is that despite all of the cost of these accounting irregularities, which Steinhoff itself has disclosed, although we don't have the details, the cost to investors, the cost to government pensions, which were in Steinhoff shares, the cost to businesses associated under the umbrella of the Steinhoff name, the moniker, we still don't have any rigorous, critical jurisprudence over this whole matter. And so we know that there have been investigations in Germany, the Netherlands, Netherlands and South Africa to some degree, but the weaknesses of the hawks have come to light. The fact that they don't necessarily have the skills to investigate opaque and confusing financial structures and movements, which is the whole point if you're going to do something suspect and dubious, that the authorities really at this point don't have what they need to prosecute and bring someone to book. And that's why, as we sit here today, Bloomberg Africa has published an article to say that for a large part, Marcus Jooste is holed up in Hermanus. He enjoys frequenting a local restaurant and sometimes goes to a tavern in Cape Town.
All right, Erin, thank you so much for that. Keep digging and keep following that story. That's ENCA's Erin Bates tracking that story a year since the Steinhoff accounting scandal broke.